Hi everybody, it's Mr. Fossa. I'm going to show you how to make a symmetrical design. Hopefully at this point you've already watched the slideshow about symmetry and radial symmetry. If you haven't, you should probably pause this and go look at that first and then come back to this because it shows you about lines of symmetry and also rotating lines of symmetry and things like that. So if you've watched that, that's great. Let me show you how to make your own design, kind of like what you see here. For starters, you need a square piece of paper. And I realize that maybe is not that easy right now, but even something like a piece of computer paper, I happen to have construction paper at home, but if you don't, even a piece of notebook paper, any paper's fine as long as it's really not colored. If you have dark colored paper, it's kind of hard to see through, and you have to be able to see through your paper a little later when we hold it up to a window, but any piece of paper is going to do. So if you need to pause this and find some paper, go ahead and do that. We need it to be square, which most paper, really is not when we get it. A good way to make a piece of paper into a square is to fold it like you see me doing here. And if I can just take this and try to line up this corner like you see me doing here. We're not robots, it's not going to be perfect, but like as humans, just to try to be as, precise as we can be so that when I fold it like this, you see I'm getting that diagonal fold. And then when I cut this with a pair of scissors, just cut off this extra piece right here, what I have left will be a square. Okay, and I kind of like that it has this fold down the middle of it because that's going to be one of my lines of symmetry as the design goes on. So once I've done this, now I have to just kind of like decide how complicated do I want my design to be. So right now I have one fold. That, could look really good. This is a design that has one fold, and that one fold is a line of symmetry that reflects the design. I have another design I've been working on at home that has, I think I've folded this paper maybe like 6 or 8 times, and it's getting to be a little bit more complicated. So if you have a lot of time, you might do this. We could talk about this a little bit later. This design actually was folded into 4 pieces. The way I did that was just like I showed you here, and then see how I went from corner to corner. Then I'm just going to fold it the other way, corner to corner, and I end up with these 4 triangular sections. So what you're going to end up with is some kind of triangular sections. Again, it might be that you have 2, it might be that you have lots. In this case, the 4 is going to work really well. If it helps you to see it better, maybe you want to fold it back up so that you're only looking at one of the triangles. But even if you didn't fold it up, hopefully you can kind of like see, like here's one of my triangles. So that's kind of up to you. And then in one of the triangles, that's where you're going to draw your design. And I kind of want to say like any design will work, but we know that artistic choices we make a big difference. So for example, the kinds of shapes and lines you draw will make a big difference. If you draw, for example, curvy, what we call organic shapes, they seem to be a little more relaxed and a little more like silly sometimes. Whereas if you draw what we call geometric shapes that are made from a lot of sharp edges and sharp lines, those tend to have a little more harshness or maybe like aggressiveness to them. It's just a difference. An example would be when I made this design, I put my son's name in there. His name is Sam. Maybe you can see that. He would like a design like this because he would want it to be a little more, I guess, like edgy kind of. Whereas my daughter, I made a design with her name in it. She's not that way. She's a lot more chill. So like when I made the Lucy, it's a little just made with like these bubble letters. It has a little bit more like playfulness to it, which you don't really get when you use more geometric shapes. So that's just kind of a choice. Also, you want to focus on shapes, not lines, because when we finish, we want to be able to color it in, right? And you can only really color in shapes. You can't color in lines. So like what I mean is this is a line, this is a shape. Hopefully you can see that difference, right? I can't really color in a line, but as long as I focus on making shapes, that's going to be a little bit more fun. The shapes can be anything. So like, for example, in a design like this one, I really wasn't thinking very much about making anything specific. When I first started out, I had a little triangle like this, and I was just drawing like doodles, and I really wasn't thinking about any meaning at all. When I made, and it's going to work out great, right? As you can see, you know, when we start reflecting that, the design looks really interesting. When I made this design, I was actually thinking that the shapes would be the letters in my name. So my name's John, there's a J, there's my O, there's my H, and there's my N. And I know that when it gets reflected, it's kind of like backwards, but it is kind of fun if the shapes have some meaning to them, and that's just kind of like something that you have to decide if you want it to just be shapes or if you want the shapes to have meaning. Once you make those decisions, and you're looking at one of the triangular panels on your paper, just go ahead and start to draw your shapes. So let's say I want to make a word. It's kind of important if you do something like that each of the letters gets its own fair share of the space. So like if I want to make a word like love, let's say, what I did was I kind of imagining my space broken into 4 places like L, O, V, E. If you're not making words or shapes that have meaning, it really doesn't matter. You can kind of do whatever you want. But see how as I go in here, there's going to be my L, and I'm making a great big O. And then here's going to be a V. And notice I'm making kind of curvy shapes because writing the word love with harsh, angry looking geometric letters doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm being just kind of like bubbly and more natural on purpose. It's kind of important that you make your shapes touch the bottom of the paper and the top of the paper if you expect to have interesting spaces in between. For those of you who are like beyond 4th grade, you'll remember that we call that the negative space. And notice that when you color your design, the shape, the space, the positive space, and also the negative space, the empty space, they both matter. And that only works really well if your designs touch the top of the paper and the bottom of the paper. So what I mean by that is, for example, I'm not just going to write the word love like this, where the L and the O are down here. You know, I really want them to hit the top of the paper and the bottom of the paper. Once I've done that, well, I still have all these empty spaces, and I want to do something interesting. So they could be that you just make some sort of like blobby blurb. Like that would work out great. As you can see, I did that a bunch of times in my design, and it's just really nothing but just kind of blobby shapes. Or your shapes could have meaning. Like, for example, maybe inside this O, instead of just a circle inside the O, I might put a heart or something like that. I still feel like there's still more space in there, so I don't know, maybe put a little shape inside of it or something. It's really up to you how you do that. You'll notice that the corners become really important because the corners get reflected a bunch of times. So you'll notice that even if you just do some little doodad like this, that becomes kind of cool later because it gets reflected and reflected and reflected a bunch of times. So I'm going to do that. Any place where I have like too much empty, again, what we call negative space, I'm just going to put some little shapes in there. Again, the corners kind of matter a lot. Maybe right in there, I'll put a little shape. And now I kind of think I got it. So that's like your next step, right? Is just to kind of draw some shapes, put some interesting things in the empty spaces so it's kind of fun to look at it and there's not too much empty space. So once you've done that, it's kind of a good idea to trace everything. That's what I did here with a marker. And what this does is it helps you to sort of like commit to the shapes that you think are important. And it helps you to sort of like define them a little bit better. You're kind of, as an artist, deciding which shapes do I want and which shapes do I not want. And as I'm tracing, notice that I'm revising. I tried to show you that in my designs where, for example, if you look at this one, I tried maybe like 6 times to draw that S in pencil. And then when I finally got to the marker, I decided which one I liked. This step is a really good place to revise. So for example, if I draw this shape and I'm like looking at this flower going, gosh, I don't really like it as much as I did before, maybe I want to change it. I don't have to follow my pencil marks exactly. This is my opportunity to change my mind. So what I do with the marker really is going to be more the finished piece. So I'm going to hurry a little bit now so that you will have more time, to work. You don't have to watch me do all this tracing, but the tracing is kind of the key thing at this step. If you don't have a marker, just press really hard with your pencil or use a black colored pencil or whatever you have that will be as dark as you can possibly make it. Because the next step, you really want those shapes to be as dark as they can be so that you can see them through the window. that's how we're going to get the reflection. Artists use a lot of different tools and techniques to copy designs. One of them is what we call a light box, where if you put your design on top of a box and there's a light underneath it like this, the light shines through and then you can see the design. I don't have a light box, but I do have a window. And a window works the same way. And you can see if I hold my design up to the window, I can see it, just barely see it, so that I can trace it if I really want to. And so what I'm doing is I'm going around in here, tracing my design. I'm kind of being careful at this point to make sure that I'm tracing it exactly like I had it before as best I can. Just going around. Now, a mistake that some students make at this step is they're tracing in a way so that the design is coming out kind of like on the back of the paper. What you want to make sure of is that your marker marks are all on the same side of the paper. So like if you treat it like it's like a taco or something, like a taco shell, all of the writing is always going to be on the outside of the taco shell. I don't really want any of the marker on the inside. I just have to be careful when I fold my paper that all of the marker is going to be on the, like what I would say is like the outside, the same sort of outside side of the taco shell. And again, I'm hurrying a little bit right now, so you'll have a little bit more time to work. And you see I'm just kind of going around, tracing everything, trying to be as exact as I can. So because, like I said before, we're not perfect, you know, and the folding might not work out great, sometimes when we open it up, there's little imperfections like this. And what we might have to do is we might have to like connect it and just make sure that the tracing kind of worked out as carefully as we want it to be. Obviously, I skipped some spaces just because I'm rushing a little, but once we get that done, then what I want to do is figure out like how can I do these sections. So you have to it's like a math problem to figure out is like how do I fold this so that I can trace it over here as well. I can see that if this line of symmetry is here, if I just fold it like this, now I hold it up to the window this way, I can see through it, and I can trace, you know, both of these sides, this panel and also this panel, and hopefully you can see that on the screen. What I want you to see is that this is something that you can do with as much complexity or simplicity as you want. So again, if you know you're younger or you don't have a lot of time and you only want a design with one line of symmetry, you know, that could be really cool. Like here's my design with Sam's name on it, and it has one fold. So what I might do is just hold that up to the window and trace it once, and I'll have one line of symmetry. That could work out great for you. Maybe this idea of, you know, four folds, or these two folds, I really should say, that make four sections might be great. This one was pretty interesting. What I did on here was I folded this square paper. I happen to have a square here. What I did was I folded it, then I folded it corner to corner the other way. So this might be for someone who is, you know, in 5th or 6th grade, or an adult in your family, or maybe if you're just, you know, you have a lot more time than other people have. Notice now what I'm doing is instead of folding it corner to corner, what I'm doing is I'm folding with a line of symmetry that goes like straight side to side. And can you imagine that one before it's even folded? How if I fold my paper this way, now I've got, I'm trying to picture this when I open it up. I see 4 triangles here, so there must be 4 more. So I'm gonna have 8 triangles. That's kind of interesting. What I did in this design was I folded it again. I just went like this, and it reminds me of a lot of origami kinds of things I've seen kids do. And once I got that, I could kind of picture, see how there's like 4 triangles here? I could imagine 4 more there, and 4 and 4. I got like 16 little triangles in there. And then when I made my design like this, and again, I'm rushing right now so that you'll have more time to work, but following the same directions as before, if I make a design like in this piece right here, and I'm just making this up really quickly as I go, I have to kind of figure out like the math part of it is like, how do I get that to be there and there and there? I have to imagine folding it. See how if I fold it like this, I can see the design here. So I go to the window, I'm going really fast so that you don't have to watch a long video, but see how as I trace this, and I'm being really careful to get everything exactly how I see it. Now when I open that up, I have that reflection, And I have to think again, like as a mathematician, like the problem solving, like how do I get into these panels now? Well, what if I went like this, right? Can you picture that? And again, I want to make sure that the writing is always on the same side of the paper. I don't want this to come out on this side. I want it on the same side. So when I fold this, I can see through it and I can trace it here and here. And again, I'm going a little fast so that you can have more time without having to watch me the whole way. But you would want to be a little more patient than this probably, because with a symmetrical design like this, the preciseness, the precision is going to matter a lot, right? When how it all comes out. Can you see that reflection? And then what I would have to do is, and I would do more here, then what I would want to do is think, okay, well now that I have this, how can I get that same design here? Maybe you could picture, like if I folded it like that, right? Then I put it back into the window, now I can trace it again. And that way you could come up with a much more intricate and much more complex design than just having the one fold. So once you've got it drawn, then it's time to make more artistic choices. Like, do you want to color it? Color is a great way to add another level of expression to your artwork. If you have coloring tools, which I know not everybody does, something bright, could really work well, like with these markers. You'd be surprised, like you think coloring everything is a good idea, but sometimes leaving some white and also having some black can make everything a little more crisp and a little more sharp. That's kind of like a focal point there where white and black are near each other. It makes almost like an eye that attracts a lot of attention. So that might be something that you would do. Maybe you could shade it, especially if you don't have markers or crayons in this Lucy design. You'll notice I was just using a colored pencil. And you could really use any pencil. It doesn't have to be a colored pencil, but any tool that you have to shade with, that can work really well just by pressing lighter to get the colors to come out light, and then pressing darker, or I should say pressing harder to get the colors to come out darker. This could be a really good way to, add interest to a design if you don't have many coloring tools. Even just a regular pencil can do it. So I think that's it. I showed you how to fold it. I showed you about the difference between geometric shapes and natural organic shapes. We talked about different ways to create, more than one line of symmetry, and for you to find a way to do that in a way that matches your skill level and also the amount of time that you have. We talked about tracing, and I showed you some tips about coloring. Have some fun, have a good time with it. Try it a bunch of times. Don't feel like the first one has to be a masterpiece. As you can see, I tried something like 6 times myself, just getting ready for this lesson, and I hope you have a good time with it. We'll see you next week.